The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon as Emma Griffith clutched the leather mail pouch tighter to her chest, her knuckles white with determination. The sound of distant wolves echoed through Savage Pass, but turning back to Golden, Colorado was no longer an option, not with letters promised to grieving widows and anxious mothers waiting on the other side of these treacherous mountains. Emma had not planned on becoming a mail carrier for the Western Postal Service. At 23, she had imagined a different life for herself, perhaps as a school teacher or even a wife. But when her father died unexpectedly last winter, leaving nothing but debts and their small cabin on the outskirts of Golden, Emma had done what was necessary to survive. The Postal Service was desperate for couriers willing to travel the dangerous routes between mining settlements, and they paid double for the riskiest deliveries. "Just stay on the main trail," Postmaster Wilson had warned her earlier that day, his weathered face creased with concern. "Don't be foolish enough to take the shortcut through Apache territory, no matter how much time it saves. Not with those bandits hitting every coach and rider that passes through." Emma adjusted her wide-brimmed hat and patted the revolver at her hip. The weight of it was still unfamiliar, though she'd been practicing her aim religiously since taking this job 3 months ago. She'd never had to use it against anything but tin cans and the occasional snake, but the stories of the Blackwater gang's latest robberies had her on edge. The sky darkened rapidly, and Emma knew she needed to make camp soon. Finding a small clearing near a stream, she dismounted her sturdy bay mare, Penny, and began gathering firewood. The nights were cold in the Colorado mountains, even in May of 1873. As she struck a match against a stone, Emma froze at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Her hand moved instinctively to her revolver, heart hammering against her ribs. Penny whinnied softly, ears pricking forward rather than flattening in alarm. "Hello, the camp," called a deep voice from the darkness. "Mind if I approach?" Emma drew her pistol. "Come forward slowly where I can see you." A tall figure on horseback emerged from the shadows, hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. As he came into the flickering light of her small fire, Emma saw he was a man perhaps 5 years her senior, with broad shoulders and a strong, square jawline shadowed with several days' growth of beard. His eyes, deep-set and observant, took in her small campsite and the mail pouch beside her bedroll. "Garrett Hayes," he said by way of introduction. "I don't mean to intrude on your camp, madam, but night's falling fast and this stretch of trail isn't safe for solitary travelers." Emma kept her pistol steady. "I'm managing just fine on my own, Mr. Hayes." The stranger nodded respectfully but dismounted anyway, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I've no doubt of that, but 2 sets of eyes are better than 1 in these parts. Especially with what I saw a few miles back." Her curiosity piqued despite her wariness. "And what was that?" "Fresh tracks. 5 horses moving fast, likely following the mail route." He nodded toward her pouch. "I reckon you're carrying more than just letters." Emma's grip tightened on her revolver. The gold certificates for the mining company's payroll were sewn into the lining of the pouch, hidden from casual inspection. "I'm just delivering mail," she said evenly. Garrett's mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. "Of course. And I'm just a cowboy heading to my brother's ranch near Silver Creek." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them as Emma assessed the stranger. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality. The revolver on his hip was well-maintained but showed signs of use. Most telling was his horse, a magnificent black gelding that stood calmly behind him, the animal of a man who knew how to care for his mount on long journeys. "You're welcome to share the fire," she finally said, lowering her pistol slightly but keeping it in hand. "But I'll be keeping watch." Wouldn't expect anything less, he replied, moving to unsaddle his horse. As Garrett tended to his gelding, Emma surreptitiously studied him. His movements were efficient and practiced, speaking of years in the saddle. But there was something else about him, a watchfulness that reminded her more of a lawman than a simple cowboy. "You've been delivering mail long?" he asked, settling across the fire from her and accepting the tin cup of coffee she reluctantly offered. "Long enough," Emma replied, unwilling to give away too much information. "It's dangerous work for anyone these days, let alone," he stopped himself, "let alone a woman." Emma finished for him, a familiar irritation rising in her throat. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, I've heard that particular observation more times than I care to count." Garrett took a sip of his coffee, wincing slightly at its strength. "I was going to say, let alone someone traveling alone, but I take your point." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "Most mail carriers travel in pairs through these mountains. The Postal Service is short-handed," Emma said simply, "and I need the money." Night fell completely around them, the fire casting long shadows among the pine trees. Emma told herself she should be more concerned about sharing her camp with a stranger, but something about Garrett Hayes put her at ease despite her best efforts to remain suspicious. "You should get some rest," he said, after they'd eaten a simple meal of beans and jerky. "I'll take first watch." Emma shook her head. "I don't know you well enough to sleep while you're awake, Mr. Hayes," he nodded, unsurprised. "Fair enough. How about we both stay up a while longer then?" To pass the time, Garrett began telling her about his brother's ranch, how they'd built it up from nothing after the war. His voice was low and pleasant, his stories painting pictures of open meadows and cattle drives. Emma found herself relaxing despite her determination to remain vigilant. "My father was a rancher too," she found herself saying. "Small spread outside Golden, couldn't make it work after the drought 2 years back." "That was a hard time," Garrett agreed. "Lost a lot of good men and cattle that year." A wolf howled in the distance and both of them tensed, listening. When the sound didn't come closer, Emma realized how tired she truly was. Her eyelids felt heavy, the day's long ride catching up with her. "Tell you what," Garrett said, noting her exhaustion. "You get some sleep. I give you my word I won't go near your mail or your possessions. When you wake, if I've kept my promise, maybe you'll trust me enough to ride together tomorrow." Emma wanted to refuse, but reason prevailed. She couldn't stay awake indefinitely, and if he meant her harm, he could have attempted it already. "First sign of trouble, I'm a light sleeper," she warned, finally holstering her revolver but keeping it within easy reach. "Noted," he said with a slight smile. Despite her concerns, Emma slept soundly that night. When she woke at dawn, Garrett was still sitting by the fire, coffee already brewing. Her mail pouch and belongings were untouched. "Morning," he greeted her. "Hope you don't mind, but I scouted ahead a bit at first light. The tracks I mentioned are fresher now." "They're definitely following this trail." Emma accepted the coffee he offered, wariness returning. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Hayes? You didn't have to stop at my camp last night, and you certainly don't need to continue on with me today." Garrett's expression grew serious. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in making sure the mail gets through safely." "Are you some kind of lawman?" she asked directly. "Not exactly." He hesitated. "But I know the men who are following you, and they're not the kind to leave witnesses." A chill ran through Emma that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You know the Blackwater gang? I've been tracking them for some time," he acknowledged. "And right now, Miss Griffith, Emma Griffith, Miss Griffith, they're tracking you. So I suggest we break camp and take a route they won't expect." Emma considered her options. The main trail would take her another day and a half to reach Silver Creek. The shortcut through Apache territory could get her there by nightfall if they weren't ambushed by bandits or hostile tribesmen. "There's another way," she said finally. "But Postmaster Wilson specifically warned against it." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "The old mining trail through Apache land," she nodded. "It's risky," he admitted, "but not as risky as being caught by the Blackwater gang. At least the Apache have honor. If we respect their boundaries and leave an offering at the crossing stones, we might pass safely." Emma began packing up her camp, decision made. "You seem to know an awful lot about local Apache customs for a visiting cowboy, Mr. Hayes." Garrett smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "My brother married a half Apache woman. She taught me a few things about surviving out here." Within half an hour, they were mounted and riding, leaving the main trail behind and cutting across a rocky plateau toward the mountains to the east. Emma kept a careful eye on their surroundings, still not entirely sure if trusting this stranger was wise. Yet something told her Garrett Hayes was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man in a dangerous land. As they rode, Emma found herself studying his profile when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself, different from the blustering bravado of most men she encountered. He rode with an easy grace, and more than once she caught him scanning the horizon with the practiced eye of someone used to looking for trouble before it found him. "So this brother of yours," she ventured as they picked their way down a steep incline, "is he expecting you?" "Eventually," Garrett replied with a half-smile. "Samuel's used to me showing up when I show up. His wife, Naomi, will scold me for being late, feed me until I can barely move, then scold me again for whatever new scars I've collected since my last visit. She sounds like quite a woman." "She is. Saved his life during the war when he was left for dead after Shiloh. Nursed him back to health even though her own people were being driven from their lands by the same army he fought for." He glanced at Emma. "They found a way to bridge their differences, built something good together." There was something wistful in his tone that made Emma wonder what kind of life Garrett Hayes led when he wasn't appearing out of nowhere to escort mail carriers through dangerous territory. By midday, they had entered a narrow canyon where the air was still and hot. Garrett signaled for them to stop at a peculiar arrangement of stones beside the trail. He dismounted and from his saddlebag produced a small leather pouch. "Tobacco," he explained, placing it among the stones. "A sign of respect." Emma watched as he murmured something in a language she didn't understand, then straightened. "I didn't take you for a superstitious man, Mr. Hayes. It's not superstition to respect others' beliefs," he replied mildly, "especially when you're crossing their land." They continued on, the canyon walls rising higher around them. Emma felt increasingly uneasy, aware of how vulnerable they were in this enclosed space. A perfect place for an ambush. As if reading her thoughts, Garrett said quietly, "Keep your eyes on the ridgeline. If there's trouble, it'll come from above." They rode in silence for nearly an hour, both scanning the rocky outcroppings above them. The oppressive heat made Emma's shirt stick to her back beneath her light jacket, and she could feel sweat trickling down her temples under her hat. "There," Garrett said suddenly, voice low but urgent. He pointed to a barely perceptible movement on the ridge. Emma's hand moved to her revolver, but Garrett shook his head. "Don't. Just keep riding normally. We're being watched, but they haven't decided what to do with us yet." Her heart pounded as they continued down the canyon, feeling exposed under the unseen observer's gaze. When they finally emerged into a wider valley, Emma released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We were lucky," Garrett said. They could have easily. The sound of a rifle shot cracked through the air, echoing off the canyon walls behind them. Their horses startled, and Emma struggled to control Penny as the mare sidestepped nervously. "Not Apache," Garrett said grimly, drawing his revolver. "They would have used arrows." "It's the gang. They must have guessed we'd take this route." 3 riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon, spurring their horses forward. Emma could see the glint of sunlight on gun barrels as they raised their weapons. "Ride," Garrett shouted, firing twice toward the approaching bandits. "Head for the trees." Emma dug her heels into Penny's sides, and the mare leaped forward, racing toward the sparse cover of pine trees at the edge of the valley. Behind her, she heard more gunshots and the thunder of hooves. Glancing back, she saw Garrett following, keeping himself between her and their pursuers. They reached the tree line with the bandits closing fast. Weaving between the pines, Emma fought to maintain speed while avoiding low-hanging branches and fallen logs. A bullet splintered bark near her head, and she ducked instinctively, pressing herself lower against Penny's neck. "In here," Garrett called, veering sharply to the left. Emma followed him down a nearly invisible game trail that plunged deeper into the forest. The path narrowed until branches slapped at their arms and faces as they passed. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew more distant as the bandits struggled to find the hidden trail. After several minutes of hard riding, Garrett led them into a small clearing beside a rocky outcropping. He dismounted quickly, leading his horse into a natural depression that offered some concealment. "They'll be searching," he said as Emma joined him, both of them breathing hard. "But they won't find this place easily. My brother and I used to hunt here years ago." Emma slid from Penny's back, legs shaky from the frantic ride. "That was close." "Too close," Garrett agreed, checking his revolver and reloading spent chambers. "They shouldn't have known to look for us on this trail. You think someone told them?" Emma asked, stroking Penny's neck to calm the nervous horse. Garrett's expression darkened. "I think you might have a problem back at your post office in Golden, someone who knows the mail routes and what's being carried." The implication was clear, and Emma felt a surge of betrayal at the thought. Postmaster Wilson had been her father's friend. He'd given her this job when no one else would hire a woman. But there were others who worked at the postal station, clerks and sorters who had access to the same information. "We should keep moving," she said, pushing the troubling thoughts aside. "How much farther to Silver Creek?" "If we keep a steady pace and don't run into more trouble, we can be there by dusk," Garrett replied, looking up at the position of the sun. "But we'll need to be careful. There's a river crossing ahead that could be dangerous if they've stationed men there." They rested the horses for a short while, sharing jerky and dried apples from Emma's provisions. As they ate, Emma studied the man beside her with newfound appreciation. Twice now he'd put himself in danger for her, a virtual stranger. "Why did you really stop at my camp last night, Mr. Hayes?" she asked. The truth this time. Garrett met her gaze steadily. "I told you I've been tracking the Blackwater gang. What I didn't mention is why." He hesitated, then continued. 6 months ago, they robbed a mail coach near Denver. The driver was my friend. He had a wife and 2 young children." His jaw tightened. "They killed him for a shipment of mining payroll that wasn't worth the price of a man's life." Emma's throat constricted. "I'm sorry. The law hasn't been able to catch them. They're too careful, too well informed." His eyes held a determined glint. "So I've been following them, gathering evidence, trying to find their hideout and who's feeding them information. And then you saw me, a lone mail carrier, likely carrying something valuable," Emma concluded. He nodded. "I figured you were walking into a trap. Couldn't just ride past and let that happen." "Well," Emma said after a moment, "I suppose I should thank you then." Garrett's serious expression softened slightly. "Thank me when we get you and your mail safely to Silver Creek." They mounted up again and continued through the forest, staying off the main trails. Garrett led them along creek beds and animal paths, clearly familiar with the territory. Despite the danger they were in, Emma found herself admiring the wild beauty around them: towering pines, glimpses of snow-capped peaks, and occasional meadows filled with early summer wildflowers. As the afternoon wore on, they approached the river Garrett had mentioned. They paused on a ridge overlooking the crossing point, carefully studying the area for any sign of the bandits. "Looks clear," Garrett said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "But that bend in the river would make a good hiding place." Emma nodded, scanning the thick brush along the riverbank. "What do you suggest? We cross downstream where it's wider but shallower. It'll be safer." They backtracked and found the spot Garrett had described. The river was broader here, the current less forceful as it flowed over a rocky bed. They urged their horses into the water, which rose only to the animal's knees at its deepest point. Halfway across, a shout rang out from upstream. Two riders appeared on the bank they'd just left, spurring their horses toward them. "Go," Garrett yelled to Emma. "Get to the other side." Emma pressed forward, water spraying as Penny surged toward the opposite shore. Behind her, she heard shots being fired. Reaching the bank, she wheeled around to see Garrett returning fire from midstream, his black gelding dancing nervously in the current. One of the pursuers fell from his saddle into the river. The other pulled up short, taking cover behind a boulder. Garrett used the opportunity to make for the shore, his horse lunging through the water with powerful strides. As he neared the bank, the hidden bandit rose and fired. Garrett jerked in the saddle and Emma's heart stopped, but he stayed mounted, making it to her side before slumping forward slightly. "You're hit," she said, seeing the dark stain spreading on his left sleeve. "Just grazed me," he replied through gritted teeth. "We need to move before he brings friends." They rode hard away from the river, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. When they finally stopped in a dense thicket of aspens, Emma insisted on examining Garrett's wound. "Take off your jacket," she ordered, dismounting and retrieving a small medical kit from her saddlebag. Garrett complied with a wince, revealing a bloody tear in his shirt sleeve. Emma carefully cut away the fabric with her small knife, exposing a deep furrow across his upper arm where the bullet had carved a path through flesh without lodging. "This needs cleaning," she said, uncorking her canteen. "It'll hurt." "Not my first bullet wound," Garrett replied with a grimace. Emma poured water over the injury, then dabbed at it with a clean handkerchief. Garrett remained stoically silent, though she could feel the tension in his muscles as she worked. "My father taught me some basic doctoring," she explained as she applied a salve from her kit. "Said every rancher needed to know how to stitch up man and beast alike. He sounds like a practical man." "He was," Emma said softly, beginning to wrap a strip of clean cloth around his arm. "Worked himself to death trying to save our ranch during the drought. Refused to give up, even when the bank was threatening to take everything." Her fingers brushed against his skin as she secured the bandage, and she was suddenly very aware of their proximity. Garrett's eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who understood loss and duty. "Thank you," he said quietly. Emma nodded, stepping back and repacking her medical supplies. "We should reach Silver Creek before dark if we keep moving." They rode more cautiously now, Garrett scanning their back trail frequently for signs of pursuit. The sun was low in the sky, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber, when they crested a hill and saw the settlement of Silver Creek spread out before them in a narrow valley. "We made it," Emma said, relief flooding through her. Garrett nodded, but his expression remained vigilant. "Don't let your guard down yet. If they were willing to follow us this far, they might have men in town." They approached Silver Creek as the last daylight faded, the windows of the small settlement glowing with lamplight. The town was typical of many that had sprung up near mining operations, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a couple of saloons doing brisk business, and scattered homes and businesses on the outskirts. Emma led the way to the post office, a small building attached to the general store. As they dismounted, she noticed Garrett scanning the street with narrow eyes. "Something doesn't feel right," he murmured. "It's too quiet." Emma glanced around. He was right for early evening. There were surprisingly few people on the street. Even the saloon seemed subdued. "Let's get your mail delivered," Garrett said, staying close to her as they approached the post office door. "Then we'll find somewhere to lay low for the night." The door was unlocked despite the late hour. Emma entered first, the familiar smell of paper and ink greeting her. A middle-aged man with spectacles looked up from behind a small counter, surprise registering on his face. "Evening," he said, setting aside the ledger he'd been writing in. "Wasn't expecting mail delivery today." "Special dispatch from Golden," Emma explained, removing the pouch from her shoulder. "Are you Mr. Peterson?" "That's right. Jacob Peterson, postmaster of Silver Creek, such as it is." His eyes darted to Garrett, who had positioned himself near the window watching the street. "And who might you be, sir?" "Just escorting Miss Griffith," Garrett replied without turning. Emma placed the mail pouch on the counter. "There's an important package for the mining company. I was told Mr. Donovan would be here to receive it personally." Peterson's expression changed subtly. "Mr. Donovan was called away unexpectedly. Mining emergency up at the Lucky Strike. But I can sign for everything and make sure it gets to him first thing tomorrow." Emma hesitated. Her instructions had been explicit: deliver the payroll certificates directly to Harold Donovan, the mine owner. No exceptions. Garrett moved away from the window to stand beside her at the counter. "When do you expect Mr. Donovan to return?" "Hard to say," Peterson replied, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. "Could be late tonight, could be tomorrow. Mining accidents are unpredictable business." Something in his tone made Emma uneasy. She glanced at Garrett, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "I think we'll hold onto the package for Mr. Donovan," Emma said, reaching for the pouch. "I can come back in the morning." Peterson's hand shot out, grabbing the pouch before she could take it. "That won't be necessary. I'm authorized to receive all mail for the mining company." "Let go of the pouch," Garrett said quietly, his hand moving to rest on his holstered revolver. The atmosphere in the small office grew tense. Peterson's eyes flicked from Garrett's face to his gun, then to the door behind them. "You're making a mistake," Peterson said, his knuckles white where he gripped the mail pouch. "I don't think so," Emma replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Donovan specifically requested personal delivery." The sound of footsteps on the wooden walkway outside made them all freeze. The door opened, and a tall man with a sheriff's badge entered, followed by two others. Emma felt a moment of relief until she saw the hard look in the lawman's eyes. "Everything all right in here, Peterson?" the sheriff asked, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Just fine, Sheriff Reeves," Peterson replied. "These folks were just delivering the mail. I was explaining that Mr. Donovan isn't available." The sheriff looked them over, his gaze lingering on Garrett. "You look familiar, mister." "Have we met?" "Don't believe so," Garrett replied evenly. "Just passing through, helping the lady deliver her mail safely. Been some trouble on the trails." "That's so," the sheriff's eyes narrowed. "What kind of trouble?" "Bandits," Emma interjected. "They followed us through Apache territory. Shot at us at the river crossing." Sheriff Reeves exchanged a look with Peterson that sent a chill down Emma's spine. Something was very wrong here. "Well," the sheriff said, Sounds like you've had quite a journey. Why don't you leave that mail with Peterson here, and I'll escort you both to the hotel. You must be tired." It wasn't a suggestion. The two men who had entered with the sheriff moved to flank them, effectively blocking the exit. Garrett shifted almost imperceptibly, positioning himself so that Emma was slightly behind him. "Actually, we need to see Mr. Donovan personally. Professional courtesy between postal services. I'm sure you understand." The sheriff's pretense of friendliness dropped away. "Donovan isn't here. And that mail, especially what's hidden in the lining of that pouch, isn't going any further than this office." Emma's blood ran cold. How did he know about the hidden certificates? "You're with them," she said, the truth dawning on her. "The Blackwater gang. You're their inside man." The sheriff smiled thinly. "Smart girl, too smart for your own good." He drew his revolver. "Now we can do this the easy way or in one fluid motion." Garrett threw himself at Emma, knocking her to the floor as gunfire erupted. The lamp on Peterson's desk shattered, plunging the office into darkness broken only by muzzle flashes. Emma felt Garrett's weight shift as he rolled, returning fire from a prone position. Someone cried out in pain. Through the chaos, Emma saw Peterson ducking behind the counter with the mail pouch still in his grip. Acting on instinct, she drew her own revolver and fired at the shadows where the sheriff had been standing. More shots, more shouting. Someone crashed into a shelf, sending papers flying. Emma crawled toward the counter, determined to retrieve her mail. A hand grabbed her ankle and she kicked out hard, connecting with something solid. The grip loosened. "Emma," Garrett's voice cut through the din. "The back door." She changed direction, crawling toward where she knew the small office's rear exit must be. The shooting had stopped momentarily, replaced by the sounds of struggle and harsh breathing. Finding the door by touch, Emma yanked it open. Moonlight spilled in, illuminating the scene enough for her to see Garrett grappling with one of the sheriff's men. The lawman himself was on the floor, unmoving, while the second deputy and Peterson were nowhere to be seen. Garrett delivered a final punch that sent his opponent slumping to the ground, then staggered toward her. "Go," he urged, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. "They'll have heard the shots in town." They burst out into the alley behind the post office, running toward where they'd left their horses. But as they rounded the corner, they found the animals gone, either stolen or scattered by the gunfire. "This way," Garrett said, pulling Emma toward a dark space between buildings as voices and running footsteps approached from the main street. They pressed themselves into the shadows, breathing hard. Emma still clutched her revolver, though she'd fired all its chambers. Garrett reloaded his own weapon with practiced efficiency despite the poor light. "The mail," Emma whispered. "Peterson has it. All those people counting on their pay will get it back," Garrett promised. "But first, we need to get out of town and find help." "Your brother's ranch," he nodded. "It's about 10 miles from here. We can make it on foot by morning if we leave now." They worked their way through the back alleys of Silver Creek, avoiding the groups of armed men now searching the town. It seemed the sheriff had many supporters or accomplices among the townspeople. By the time they reached the edge of town, slipping past a livery stable where they briefly considered but decided against stealing horses, Emma's legs were trembling with exhaustion and delayed shock. The night was clear and cool, stars brilliant overhead as they struck out across open country toward the distant mountains where Garrett's brother's ranch lay. Emma stumbled once, twice, and on the third time Garrett's strong hand caught her elbow. "We need to rest," he said. "Just for an hour." "You're dead on your feet." Emma wanted to protest, but her body betrayed her. They found shelter in a small copse of trees near a stream, far enough from the road to be hidden from casual view. Sinking down with her back against a tree trunk, Emma finally allowed herself to process what had happened. "The sheriff," she said. "He's been working with the bandits all along." Garrett nodded grimly, settling beside her. "Controlling which shipments get through, which get robbed. Perfect position for it. And Peterson, too." She shook her head in disbelief. "How many others in town are involved? Hard to say. Small mining towns like this, the sheriff holds a lot of power. People either join in or look the other way." Emma drew her knees to her chest, suddenly cold despite the mild night. All those people counting on that payroll, miners with families to feed. Garrett draped his jacket around her shoulders despite his own injury. "We'll make it right. Get to Samuel's ranch, gather some men we can trust, and return for the mail." "Why are you doing all this?" Emma asked, turning to look at him in the moonlight. "You could have ridden away at any point. This isn't your fight." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "When I was younger, I drifted a lot. Never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots. Never took a stand for anything or anyone." His expression grew distant. "During the war, I saw what happens when good people stand aside and let evil men do as they please." "Your friend," Emma said softly. "The male driver they killed." Garrett nodded. "Jim Coulter gave me a place to stay when I had nowhere else to go. His wife treated me like family." His jaw tightened. "The law failed them. I won't." Emma studied his face, seeing the determination there, the honor that drove him despite the danger. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for not riding past my camp that night." His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. "Get some rest, Emma. I'll keep watch." Despite her intention to stay awake, exhaustion claimed her quickly. She drifted into uneasy sleep, still aware of Garrett's solid presence beside her, his hand holding hers as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Emma woke to birdsong and the soft gray light of dawn. She was still leaning against the tree, but somehow during the night, her head had come to rest on Garrett's shoulder. He was awake, watching the surrounding woods with alert eyes that showed no sign of having slept. "Morning," he said quietly when he felt her stir. "We should get moving soon." Emma straightened, suddenly self-conscious about their proximity. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," he replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. They shared the last of Emma's jerky and water, then set out again as the sun rose over the mountains. The terrain grew more rugged as they walked, climbing steadily into foothills covered with pine and aspen. By mid-morning, Garrett pointed to a thin column of smoke rising from a valley ahead. "Samuel's ranch," he said. "Another hour's walk." Emma nodded, too tired for words. Her feet were blistered inside her boots, and every muscle ached from the combination of yesterday's hard ride and their nighttime flight from Silver Creek. They crested a rise and saw the ranch spread out below them, a sturdy log house with several outbuildings, corrals containing horses, and a small herd of cattle grazing in a distant meadow. It looked peaceful, removed from the dangers they'd faced. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. She called something over her shoulder, and moments later a tall man with a strong resemblance to Garrett stepped out, a rifle in his hands. "It's me, Samuel," Garrett called, waving. The rifle lowered immediately, and the man strode forward to meet them, the woman following close behind. "Garrett, what in God's name?" Samuel Hayes broke off, taking in their exhausted, trail-worn appearance and Garrett's blood-stained sleeve. "What happened?" "Trouble in Silver Creek," Garrett replied. "This is Emma Griffith. She's a mail carrier from Golden. We need your help." Samuel's wife, Naomi, Emma presumed, stepped forward. She was beautiful, with long black hair and proud features that spoke of her Apache heritage. Her dark eyes assessed them quickly before she took charge. "Inside, both of you," she said firmly. "Food, rest, and tending those wounds first. Talk can come after." Too tired to argue, Emma followed them into the warm, welcoming house. The next hour passed in a blur of hot food, coffee, and Naomi's gentle but efficient medical attention. Emma's blistered feet were bathed and bandaged, while Garrett's bullet graze was properly cleaned and stitched. Seated at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, Emma felt human again for the first time in days. She watched as Samuel and Garrett conversed in low tones by the fireplace, their resemblance more pronounced now that she could see them together. Both had the same strong jawline and broad shoulders, though Samuel's face showed fewer lines of hardship. Naomi sat down across from Emma, passing her a plate of warm bread. "My husband's brother has never brought a woman to our home before," she observed with a directness that was somehow not offensive. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's not we're not," she stammered. "We only met 2 days ago when he helped me escape bandits." Naomi's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a knowing gleam. Some connections do not need time to form. They simply are. She glanced toward the brothers. "He looks at you the way Samuel first looked at me, as if he has found something he did not know he was searching for." Before Emma could respond to this unsettling observation, the men joined them at the table. "Samuel's sending one of his hands to alert the federal marshal in Denver," Garrett explained. "But it will take at least 2 days for him to arrive with enough men." "The miners can't wait that long for their pay," Emma said. "And by then, Peterson and the sheriff, if he survived, will have hidden or spent those certificates." "Exactly," Garrett agreed. "Which is why we're going back tonight. Samuel has men he trusts, good riders who aren't afraid of a fight." "Count me among them," Naomi said firmly, in a tone that brooked no argument from her husband. Samuel smiled at his wife with clear admiration. "Naomi's a better shot than most men I know, and she knows the back trails better than anyone." Plans were made over the meal. Samuel would gather 6 of his most trusted ranch hands. They would ride for Silver Creek at dusk, approaching from the hills to avoid being seen. Naomi knew of an abandoned mine shaft near town where they could leave the horses and enter on foot. "What about the sheriff's men?" Emma asked. "They'll be watching for us, which is why we won't give them time to organize," Garrett said. "A quick strike in and out before they realize what's happening." As the others discussed strategy, Emma found herself watching Garrett. Despite his exhaustion and injury, he was fully engaged, his mind clearly working through every possibility. She admired his determination, his unwavering sense of right and wrong in a land where such clarity was rare. He caught her looking and held her gaze for a moment. Something passed between them, unspoken but powerful. Emma looked away first, her heart beating faster than the moment warranted. After the meal, Naomi showed Emma to a small bedroom where she could rest before their night mission. The bed, with its clean sheets and soft quilt, looked like heaven after 2 nights of rough camping. "There's water for washing," Naomi said, indicating a basin and pitcher on a stand by the window. "And I've left some clean clothes that should fit you." "Thank you," Emma said sincerely. "For all of this. You've been so kind to a stranger," Naomi smiled. "Any woman brave enough to carry mail through Apache territory and stand against corrupt lawmen is no stranger to me. She is a sister." After Naomi left, Emma washed away the dirt of travel as best she could, changed into the borrowed clothes, a simple skirt and blouse that fit reasonably well, and lay down on the bed. Despite her racing thoughts, sleep claimed her almost instantly. She woke to a soft knock at the door. The angle of sunlight through the window told her it was late afternoon. "Come in," she called, sitting up and smoothing her tousled hair. Garrett entered, looking rested and clean himself in fresh clothes. His hair was damp from washing and he'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline that his beard had partially hidden. The effect was striking, and Emma found herself momentarily at a loss for words. "Samuel's men are ready," he said. "We'll be riding out in an hour." He hesitated. "You don't have to come, Emma. You could stay here where it's safe." Emma stood, lifting her chin. "That's my mail they stole, Mr. Hayes. My responsibility. I'm coming." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I thought you'd say that." He stepped closer, his expression growing serious. "But I need you to promise me something. If things go wrong, if there's shooting, don't be a hero. Your life is worth more than mail or money." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I could say the same to you." "I'm not the one with a bright future ahead," he replied quietly. "You have a home to return to, a life to build." "A drafty cabin and debts," Emma corrected him. "Not much of a future." Garrett shook his head. "You're selling yourself short, Emma Griffith. Any woman who can do what you've done these past few days can build whatever future she wants." His faith in her, this man who barely knew her, touched something deep inside Emma. Before she could respond, however, Samuel called from outside, and the moment passed. "We should go," Garrett said, stepping back. Emma nodded, following him from the room with a strange reluctance. Something had changed between them, or perhaps it had been changing gradually since that first night by the campfire. Whatever it was, it would have to wait until their current mission was complete. Outside, the ranch yard was busy with preparations. 8 horses were saddled and waiting, including a sturdy paint mare that Naily indicated was for Emma. Samuel's men were checking weapons and securing supplies, their faces serious but determined. As the sun began to set, they rode out, a small army of justice heading toward Silver Creek. Emma rode beside Garrett, drawing strength from his steady presence. Whatever happened tonight, she knew with absolute certainty that he would stand with her until the end. The approach to Silver Creek took them through rugged country that would have been impassable in darkness without Naily's expert guidance. They left their horses at the abandoned mine shaft as planned and continued on foot, moving silently through the trees until the lights of town appeared below them. Samuel had brought along a man named Charlie who had worked in Silver Creek until recently and knew the layout well. According to him, Peterson lived in rooms above the post office, which meant the stolen mail pouch was likely there. The sheriff's office was on the opposite end of the main street, and the deputies generally congregated at the saloon in between. "We split into 3 groups," Garrett outlined quietly as they gathered in the shadows at the edge of town. "Samuel, you take 3 men and secure the sheriff's office. Charlie, you and Naily cover the saloon, make sure no one interferes. Emma and I will get the mail from Peterson." Everyone nodded their agreement. Emma checked her revolver one last time, the weight of it somehow reassuring in her hand. "If anything goes wrong," Samuel added, "we meet back at the mine shaft. No heroics." With a final exchange of nods, they separated. Emma followed Garrett through the dark alleyways of Silver Creek, retracing their escape route from the previous night. The town seemed quieter than before, with fewer people on the streets despite the early hour. "Something's not right," Garrett murmured as they paused in the shadows near the post office. "Where is everyone?" Emma studied the building. A light burned in the upstairs window Peterson's rooms, but the office below was dark. "Maybe they're celebrating their theft," she suggested. "Maybe," Garrett replied, though he didn't sound convinced. "Let's move. Up the back stairs, quick and quiet." They slipped across the open space to the exterior staircase that led to Peterson's quarters. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. At the top, Garrett tested the door locked, as expected. With a glance at Emma, he stepped back and then drove his shoulder against it with controlled force. The lock splintered with surprising ease, and they burst into a small, cluttered sitting room. Peterson jumped up from a desk in the corner, his face pale with shock. "Don't move," Garrett ordered, his revolver trained steadily on the postmaster. "Where's the mail pouch?" Peterson's eyes darted to a door on the far side of the room. "I don't have it. The sheriff took it." "You're lying," Emma said, moving forward. "Sheriff Reeves may be dead. We saw him go down in the gunfight." "Then his deputy has it," Peterson insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. "I swear it's not here." Garrett kept his gun on Peterson while Emma quickly searched the room, opening drawers and checking under furniture. "Nothing. Check the bedroom," Garrett suggested, nodding toward the side door. Emma moved cautiously into the adjoining room, lighting a lamp to reveal a rumpled bed and more clutter. A battered trunk stood at the foot of the bed, secured with a padlock. "In here," she called. Garrett appeared in the doorway, shoving Peterson ahead of him. "Open it," he commanded, gesturing to the trunk with his revolver. Peterson hesitated. "I don't have the key." "Then I'll open it my way," Garrett replied, cocking his revolver. "Wait." Peterson fumbled in his vest pocket and produced a small key. With trembling fingers, he unlocked the trunk. Emma pushed open the lid to reveal not just her mail pouch but several others, along with bundles of letters and small packages. "You've been stealing mail for months," she realized, recognizing pouches from routes all over the territory. "Just taking our fair share," Peterson muttered. "The mining companies make fortunes while the rest of us scrape by." Emma retrieved her pouch, checking that the hidden compartment in the lining was still intact. The gold certificates were there, untouched. "These are miners' wages," she said angrily. "Families waiting for letters from loved ones. Medicine people needed." A sudden commotion from the street below interrupted them shouting, followed by gunshots. "That's our cue to leave," Garrett said, grabbing rope from Peterson's woodpile to quickly bind the postmaster to a chair. "Sounds like Samuel found the sheriff." They hurried down the back stairs, Emma clutching the recovered mail pouch. The main street was in chaos, with townsfolk running for cover as gunfire erupted from the direction of the sheriff's office. Naomi and Charlie were crouched behind a water trough, exchanging shots with several men barricaded in the saloon. "Go to Naomi," Garrett told Emma, pushing her toward the relative safety of the trough. "I'm going to help Samuel." "No," Emma caught his arm. "We stay together." The determination in her eyes must have convinced him. With a quick nod, he led her along the side of the buildings toward the sheriff's office, keeping to the shadows. They found Samuel and his men pinned down behind an overturned wagon, exchanging fire with what appeared to be the sheriff himself, very much alive, and several deputies fortified inside the office. "Thought you said you shot him," Garrett commented as they joined Samuel behind the wagon. "Thought I did," Emma replied, ducking as a bullet splintered wood near her head. "We're outnumbered," Samuel reported grimly. "Looks like half the town is in on their scheme." Garrett surveyed the situation. "We've got what we came for," he said, nodding to Emma's pouch. "Time to retreat while we can." Samuel nodded his agreement and signaled to his men. One by one, they began working their way back, providing covering fire for each other as they retreated toward the edge of town. Emma stayed close to Garrett as they moved from cover to cover. They had almost reached the alley that would lead them back to the mine shaft when she heard a cry of pain. Turning, she saw one of Samuel's men fall, clutching his leg. Without hesitation, Garrett rushed back to the fallen man, helping him to his feet. Emma provided covering fire, her hands steady despite her fear. They had almost reached safety when Sheriff Reeves himself appeared at the mouth of the alley, revolver raised. "Drop it, girl," he snarled at Emma. or I put a bullet in Hayes. Time seemed to slow. Emma saw Garrett frozen in place, supporting the wounded ranch hand. She saw the hatred in the sheriff's eyes, the unwavering aim of his gun, and she knew with absolute clarity that he would shoot regardless of what she did. In one fluid motion, Emma raised her revolver and fired. The sheriff staggered backward, a look of surprise crossing his face before he crumpled to the ground. "Go!" she shouted to Garrett, who wasted no time in helping the wounded man toward the mine shaft. They regrouped at the horses, breathless and shaken but largely intact. The ranch hand Emma had saved would recover, according to Naomi's assessment of his wound. As they mounted up to ride away from Silver Creek, Emma felt Garrett's eyes on her. "That was some shooting," he said quietly. "My father taught me well," she replied, unable to fully process what she had done. She had taken a life, a corrupt, dangerous life, but a human life nonetheless. Garrett seemed to read her thoughts. "You saved more than you took, Emma. Remember that." They rode through the night, pushing hard to put distance between themselves and any potential pursuit from Silver Creek. By dawn, they had reached Samuel's ranch again, where the wounded man was properly tended and the others collapsed into exhausted sleep. Emma found herself too wired to rest, despite her body's protests. She sat on the porch of the ranch house as the sun rose, the mail pouch beside her, turning the events of the past few days over in her mind. Soft footsteps announced Garrett's arrival. He settled beside her on the porch steps, offering a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said. "Thank you." She accepted it gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm mug. "Couldn't sleep," he shook his head. "Too much thinking to do." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the golden light spread across the valley. "What happens now?" Emma finally asked. "With Silver Creek, I mean." "The federal marshal will arrive tomorrow with enough men to clean up what's left of the Blackwater gang," Garrett replied. Samuel's rider reached Denver faster than expected. "And the mail, we'll make sure it gets delivered properly. All of it, not just your pouch." Emma nodded, relief washing through her. She had fulfilled her duty despite everything. Then another thought occurred to her. "What about you? What will you do now?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "I've been chasing the Blackwater gang for 6 months. Haven't thought much beyond catching them." "You could stay here," Emma suggested. "With your brother. Samuel and Naomi have their own life. I'd just be in the way." He glanced at her. "What about you? Back to delivering mail in Golden?" Emma considered this. The thought of returning to her solitary routes, facing the dangers of the trail alone after everything that had happened, held little appeal. "I don't know," she admitted. "It paid the bills, but it's not much of a future," he finished for her, echoing her own words from earlier. Another silence fell between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "I've been thinking," Garrett said finally. "The Postal Service needs reliable carriers on these dangerous routes. Teams, not individuals." Emma's heart quickened. "Teams, 2 riders watching each other's backs." He turned to face her fully. "We made a good team these past few days, Emma. We could continue." "You want to deliver mail with me?" she asked, surprised. "I want to ride with you," he corrected gently. "The mail is just an excuse." The directness of his statement took her breath away. "Garrett, I know it's sudden," he continued quickly. "We barely know each other, but I've never met anyone like you, Emma Griffith. Brave, determined, willing to stand up for what's right no matter the cost." His eyes held hers. "I'm not offering marriage or promises I can't keep, just a chance to see where this trail leads us, together." Emma looked at him, really looked at the man who had ridden into her camp 3 nights ago and changed everything. He was offering her not just companionship but partnership, a shared purpose, and perhaps, in time, something more. "Yes," she said simply. I'd like that." The smile that spread across Garrett's face was like the sunrise, warm and full of promise. Hesitantly, as if afraid she might vanish, he reached out and took her hand in his. Emma entwined her fingers with his, the gesture sealing their agreement more surely than words. 2 days later, they rode into Golden side by side, the recovered mail properly delivered to Silver Creek, and the federal marshal in full control of the situation there. The Blackwater gang was finished, its members either dead or in custody awaiting trial. Postmaster Wilson was astonished by their tale, but quickly saw the wisdom in Garrett's proposal that they work as a team going forward. The Western Postal Service had been losing couriers to the dangers of the trail. A pair of riders would be much more secure. Over the following months, Emma and Garrett built a reputation as the most reliable mail team in the territory. They faced bandits, blizzards, and flash floods together, always completing their routes no matter the obstacles. The trust between them deepened with each journey, as did their feelings for each other. Emma sold her father's cabin and used the money to pay off his remaining debts. She and Garrett rented rooms in Golden between routes, maintaining separate living quarters but spending most of their time together. It was on a crisp autumn evening, returning from a particularly difficult delivery through early mountain snows, that Garrett finally spoke the words they'd both been circling for months. They had stopped to make camp in the same clearing where they'd first met, a coincidence that hadn't escaped either of them. As they sat beside the fire, sharing coffee and conversation as had become their custom, Garrett suddenly took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice unusually solemn. "A dangerous pastime," Emma teased, though her heart had begun to race. "I've done my share of wandering," he continued. "Never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots, but these past months with you—" He met her eyes across the flames. "I'm tired of renting rooms in Golden, Emma. I want a home with you." Emma's breath caught. "Are you asking me to marry you, Garrett Hayes?" "I am," he confirmed, a smile tugging at his mouth. "Though I'm making a mess of it, I had a speech prepared." "I don't need speeches," Emma said softly. "Just you." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with all the emotion they'd held in check for so long. When they finally broke apart, Emma rested her forehead against his, overwhelmed by the certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. "Is that a yes?" Garrett murmured. Emma laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Golden, with Samuel and Naeli making the journey to stand with them. The Postal Service granted them a week's leave for a honeymoon, which they spent in a cozy cabin in the mountains that Garrett had somehow arranged to borrow. On their return, they purchased a small piece of land just outside Golden, with plans to build a proper home when time allowed. For the present, they continued their mail routes, working as a team just as they had promised each other that morning on Samuel's porch. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came changes. Emma discovered she was expecting a child, news that filled Garrett with a mixture of joy and concern for her safety on the trails. "Perhaps it's time we considered a more settled life," he suggested as they sat on the porch of their newly completed cabin, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. Emma placed her hand over his. "I've been thinking the same thing. The Postal Service has offered us management of the Golden Station when Postmaster Wilson retires next month. Running the post office instead of riding the routes." Garrett considered this. "It would be safer, more stability for the baby. For our family," Emma corrected with a smile. "And we'd still be working together, just with fewer bullets flying our way." Garrett laughed, pulling her close against his side. "I'm not sure if I should be relieved or disappointed about that part." "I think we've had enough excitement to last a lifetime," Emma replied, thinking of all they'd been through together. "Not quite a lifetime," Garrett murmured, his hand moving to rest gently over her still flat stomach. "We're just beginning ours." As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Emma leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she first set out alone on that dangerous mail route a year ago. The path that had brought them together had been fraught with peril, but she wouldn't change a single step of the journey. 6 years later, the Hayes family gathered on that same porch to celebrate their son's 5th birthday. Young Samuel, named for his uncle, chased his 2-year-old sister Elizabeth around the yard while their parents watched from the steps. Emma leaned against Garrett's shoulder, just as she had done countless times over the years. "Remember when you rode into my camp that night? I nearly shot you." Garrett chuckled, his arm tightening around her waist. "Best risk I ever took, riding with you without being asked." "I'm glad you did," Emma said softly. The Golden Post Office had flourished under their management. They had expanded routes, hired reliable carriers, and established a reputation for delivering mail through even the most challenging conditions. Emma still occasionally rode special deliveries herself, though never alone. Garrett insisted on accompanying her, just as he had that first time. As the children tired of their game and came running to their parents, Emma felt a familiar wave of gratitude wash over her. For the dangerous trail that had led her to Garrett, for his courage in riding beside her when he could have passed by, for the life they had built together, delivering not just mail but hope and connection to the scattered communities of the Colorado Territory. And most of all, for the love that had begun with a stranger's unexpected kindness on a lonely trail, a love that had proven stronger than bandits' bullets and more enduring than the wild landscape that had forged it.